Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to New York Shakespeare Live. This is our program that we had started everything with during the pandemic era. We started right here on Instagram with Instagram Live. We have since then added many more programs to our repertoire with shows on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, and in many other places, but we are very happy to be back here on Instagram Live. We had a little bit of a hiatus, but we are back now tonight, and we have a super-sized, fantastic program for you all tonight. Our mission here at New York Shakespeare is to cover as much as we can of what is happening in the New York Shakespeare scene, whether that is theater, theatrical performances. We're back on our stages. We're back to live performances. Whether that is film screenings or whatever else might be in relevance to Shakespeare here in New York, we try to bring it all to you in anywhere where you have social media. We're here on Instagram. We are on Facebook with our Facebook group, our Facebook page. We are on Twitter. We are on LinkedIn, YouTube, and in many other locations. So anywhere where you are on social media, look us up, New York Shakespeare, and we bring to you as much as we can as what we can find that's happening in New York. So there's plenty to keep you busy, plenty of theatrical performances, plenty of other things happening, podcasts, all kind of wonderful things happening in the world of Shakespeare right here in New York. For those who are joining us for the very first time, my name is Rodney Hakim. I'm the voice behind the New York Shakespeare social media feeds. And I'm very excited to have us all back here tonight for our big return to Instagram Live. We have not just 4 guests, 4 fantastic groups here tonight. We're going to have a little bit of a departure from our previous format. In our previous format here on Instagram Live, due to whatever the earlier editions of Instagram Live were, we were only able to speak with 1 guest at a time. Tonight, we're going to try something that is allegedly available with the newer releases of Instagram, where we can chat with multiple guests at once. So we'll try that out tonight and see if that all works out as as we hope it will. But just to give you a rundown of who's going to be joining us tonight, we have Zack Zamchik of Variety Life Productions and of the new immersive version of A Midsummer Night's Dream called Midsummer, a Shakespearience. We have our friend James Rightmyer Jr. from Hamlet Isn't Dead, and they have their version of Measure for Measure coming up next week, or in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We have our friends Liz Thaler and Cristina Lundy from the Shakespeare Exchange, and they are famous. They've been doing all kind of programming around town for many years. They do their ShakesBEER, which is a very popular program. Right now, they just finished up a run of The Winter's Tale this past weekend, and we'll talk to Cristina and hopefully Liz about that. And last but not least, we have our podcasters. We have Diana Green and Erin DeWard of a saucy podcast that we're just going to abbreviate as F Shakespeare, and you can figure out what the rest comes after F. But that is a very exciting new podcast from a couple of New York-based educators who have a lot to say about the Bard. Before we get into our 4 interview groups tonight, we'll take a moment just to catch up on what is happening in the world of Shakespeare here in New York. For those of you who have been part of the New York Shakespeare group or have been following our social media feeds, you know that we've had a lot of interview programs over the past several months. We had our series on Outdoor Shakespeare in New York. Those are still available. We had our series on producing Shakespeare on Broadway and beyond. We had many different programs that are all available in our archives, and those are all free, all available to be seen on pretty much any one of our platforms. If you go on our YouTube channel, right here on Instagram, on Facebook, you can look through our archives and find tons of free content from our past interviews, and that's all available all over social media. One of the things that we discussed at length in our previous discussions was the return of live Shakespeare, not just to some of the stages around New York, in the parks, in some of the open spaces around New York, but to actual stages, indoor stages. And we saw that with perhaps the biggest form of that in New York is the return of Broadway. So we're all very excited that Broadway is back. And I think perhaps for myself, speaking on behalf of some of the folks here in the New York Shakespeare scene, I think we're all super excited about the recent announcement that Broadway is going to have its next Shakespeare production, and that is going to be Macbeth, featuring Daniel Craig, 007, who has his latest Bond movie out right now. He just wrapped up his appearances in the James Bond franchise, and he is returning to Broadway. He will be playing Macbeth, and his Lady Macbeth will be Ruth Negga, who is a fantastic Shakespearean actress, did a lot of work down in Virginia and D.C., so we're very excited about that. That's coming up in the spring. There's a lot of other things happening. Six on Broadway is finally open. It's not Shakespeare, but it is Shakespeare-centric, as it deals with the many wives of Henry VIII, and there's a lot of other fantastic content. Red Bull Theater, our friends there, are doing Pericles. We have all kind of friends doing a ton of content all around town, so we are very excited about all that's happening. And once again, you can check it all out. You can click onto right here on Instagram. You can click onto our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and keep tabs on all the things that are happening. We try to share as much of that content as we come across, and it's all free. It's all right there for you to catch on. So support your local Shakespeare, whatever that might be, and we will do that ourselves by interviewing our 4 fantastic groups here tonight and letting you know what's going on with them and their productions. Let's ask first our friend, let's see if I can find him, Zack Zamchik. Now, Zack, let's see if I can invite him this way. Okay. I'm going to ask him to go live with me. Zack Zamchik is someone who's been producing not just Shakespeare, but a lot of immersive... Zack!
Hello!
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me on the show. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. How about you?
Oh, I can hear you great, and thank you for having me. I might
Certainly.
touch the bottom of my frame here. There we go.
Certainly. So, Zack, I got introduced to you through an old friend and colleague of mine, Jay Michaels, who I think is helping you with some of the stuff for your show. And you are, I believe your group is called Variety Life Productions.
That's correct.
So go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to ask you to tell us what Variety Life Productions is all about, when it started, how you got into all this stuff.
Absolutely. So Variety Life Productions is the brainchild of Kaitana Magno and Jimmy Sutherland. And they come from a nightlife background, but they also have a rich history. Kaitana was a ballerina. Jimmy was a tap dancer. It's kind of a variety-infused nightlife company. And I got hooked up with them because I worked on the immersive experience Queen of the Night in Times Square a couple years back. And
I remember seeing that show, and that was a really great show.
Oh, I'm glad you saw it. It was formative in how I learned to produce these kinds of events and how to do a show that feels luxurious to those who care about that, but also has nuance and a story for people who are looking for something deeper. And because Jimmy and Kaitana and I were both working for similar people, we met and have kept in touch. Our last show together was Carmen to Havana and Back, which was at the Public Hotel. And this kind of follows in the same vein as that show.
Okay. All right. So for those who are not familiar or might not have experienced what the immersive theatrical experience is like, I'll give you my little thumbnail summary, and then you can tell me if this sounds correct to you. Basically, it's not that you just have a stage where you have the actors on a proscenium, as in a traditional theater, doing a show, and the audience is sitting in their seats and just watching, and there's like a wall, that fourth wall between the audience and the performers. The performers are all around, they're in different spots around the venue, and the audience kind of drifts from one location to the other and interacts with the different people that are performing different scenes at different times. Would that about sum it up?
That sounds about right. I'd say, the first wildly popular immersive show was inspired by Shakespeare, Sleep No More.
Sleep No More, running strong.
And it is one part Macbeth and one part Hitchcock, right? That's the fusion that they were going for. Our show, because of the current climate, and we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable to be in a space together and not that they're claustrophobic or, in tight quarters where they might have to breathe on each other. It does mostly happen around a central stage, but there certainly is ample opportunity to explore the space. You can dance if you want to. It's a very atmospheric, kind of vaudevillian experience.
Yeah, I remember when I mentioned, or you mentioned Queen of the Night, which played in New York about maybe 8-9 years ago. And there's elements of vaudeville elements. There's almost like a circus element to it. There's that burlesque element to it. There's a lot of different theatrical forms, a lot of different presentational forms that are melded into one presentation.
And one of the things that's special about this show, I'd say, because I've done a number of different shows in a similar format, but this one has an emphasis on tap dance and on rhythm, kind of inspired by iambic pentameter. And so we have these virtuosic tap dancers, many of whom will appear on Broadway next year in things like Funny Girl, people from Stomp who are also master percussionists. We have a national beatboxing champion, but is soon to be international. And so we're really playing with, the lub-dub of, the heartbeat of New York coming back. There's this whole thematic underpinning of it's time to gather again, because Midsummer, while it's about jealousy and it's about transformation, it's also about connection, and it's connection between the four lovers. It's about how Bottom isolates himself from his own troupe. There's all kinds of connection going on in the piece, and God knows that after the years that we've had, we could use a bit of human connection right now.
So that brings us up to one of the biggest questions that have been surrounding the return to live performance here in New York, whether it's on Broadway, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, or whatever, is what does your group make of the return to theater in the age of the coronavirus? Do you have certain protocols with regard to how the audience is, or as it relates to the performers? Do the performers will have to be certified vaccinated? Does the audience have to present any kind of proof of a negative test? What's your protocol?
Yep, we everyone in the venue, from our performers to our wait staff, are all fully vaccinated, and we have their records on file. We also ask that, each of our guests needs to provide proof of vaccination to enter, and we ask that people wear their masks when they're not actively drinking. There is a bar on site, and we've been working to navigate how to keep that safe. At the same time, our seating is spaced in such a way that you can keep your distance, and there's also some standing room if you'd like to further distance. But in terms of our outlook, our optimism, we're really excited to have audiences come back, and we've seen a great response to our marketing pushes, to Jay's great work on our press side. And so we're cautiously optimistic that we're moving in the right direction. And it really comes down to giving people agency. I think a lot of people, when they hear immersive theater, they feel like, oh, I might be split up from my group. I may have to participate and be put on the spot. And
right.
All of the things make people feel like they have no control over their situation.
Right.
We're working really hard to make sure that if you don't want to dance, you don't have to dance. You'll have fun. The one thing that we're requiring people to do is dress up for a nice night on the town, because we think that really elevates the experience for everyone, and it makes it memorable and it makes it special. But that's, you don't have to go out and buy a new zoot suit for us. Just something elevated.
Now, you mentioned iambic pentameter before. Before you came to this, what is your background in Shakespeare?
It's a great question. I was a Broadway kid growing up, so I was more on the musical sides of things than Shakespeare. But lately, I've had some great opportunities to work with people in the local Shakespeare scene. I worked with Food of Love Productions on one of the virtual offerings. Victoria's the artistic director over there.
Sure. Our friend Victoria, of course.
And I've also I've become friends with the Drunk Shakespeare crew. I've met a number of people who are playing with the form, and I'm hoping that we were planning a production of Romeo and Juliet before the pandemic, and I'm hoping we can get back into the swing of that.
Okay. Now, here's a question that I often pose to our guests here on this program, is that depending on who you ask, Shakespeare can either be something that really helps to sell tickets in New York. New Yorkers, a lot of them really love Shakespeare, or it could be a real turnoff for people. Some people just say Shakespeare, it sounds like a different language. I don't know what to make of it. What's your take on it? And what are you doing to make it easier for an audience to embrace the Shakespearean language?
Sure. I will say that when we were starting this project, I wasn't sure how much of the actual text was going to appear in the performance. And that means that true Shakespeare lovers and devotees like yourself, like I wouldn't want you to come and feel like we had been disrespectful to the source material. I'm happy to say that a good amount of the language is in it, and we really have played into the story, so it happens interstitially throughout this variety performance, and you can really track the characters. But in terms of what sells, I don't know. I'm really loving. I love when Shakespeare is played to the masses. You know, what was beautiful about Shakespeare in his own time was that he was doing things that worked equally for the royalty and the groundlings, right?
Absolutely, absolutely right.
And
high humor, low humor.
Exactly, and we're trying to strike that balance too, and we're trying to, you know, if there's Shakespeare that you're looking for, you're going to find it. And if you came just for a good time, we're going to sneak that Shakespeare into your ear, and you'll leave feeling a little more inspired than you came.
Right. That's it. That's it. You give everyone a little bit of what they're looking for, so the audience, wherever walk of life they're coming from, whatever avenue they're coming from, that they have something to grab onto and to connect with your show. So it sounds fantastic to me. Where can people go and find your website, your social media presence to connect with the show and get their tickets?
Absolutely. We are at midsummershakespearience.com. That's Midsummer, Shakespearience.com. And you can order tickets through the website. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to me. I'm Zack, Z-A-C-H, at VarietyLifeProductions.com. We're playing every Wednesday through Sunday at 8 p.m. starting this week. So we're just about to open. Everyone else is at the venue rehearsing.
That's fantastic. So you open this Wednesday night, the 13th.
That's right. And, you know, tickets are moving fast, which we're excited about. But what we're really excited about is bringing a new show to New York City and really creating a community around this thing. So it's been a ride so far, and we're sure there will be many more adventures to come as, you know, we look to add a nightlife component after the show. We look to judge the material based on feedback from the audiences. That's one of the really beautiful things about indie theater, but also immersive theater in particular, is that we're able to change things slowly over time. And that means that your night at the theater is absolutely unique.
That's fantastic. What's the runtime of the show?
It's 2 hours, and it starts at 8 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, you heard it here, folks. I urge you guys to go check out Variety Life Productions and their new show, Midsummer, a Shakespearience. I'll put the link for the show in the text, in all the related materials to this interview. After this program concludes, the entire program will be saved on our Instagram page, so you can come back and watch the show in its entirety. I'll also make notes and with links to all of our interviewees, so you can just click on that link and go right into the page for Zack and Midsummer, a Shakespearience. All right, Zack, I wish you the best of luck. I hope to catch it myself. It sounds like a great project, and I wish you guys all the best with this Midsummer, a Shakespearience.
Thank you so much. We hope to see you at the show, and I really appreciate everyone coming to watch. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, Zack.
Good night.
Okay, so we'll remove Zack, and we will ask our audience. Audience, are you liking what you're seeing so far? Any thoughts, any reactions? Send your hearts, send your thumbs up, send your questions, anything you want to pose either to Zack or to any of the other guests that we have coming up. We have a full program here tonight. We have a lot going on, and we will jump next into, let's see if we can do our multiple person interview. We'll ask our friends from Shakespeare Exchange. That is Cristina and Liz. We'll see if we can ask them to join us. Now this is new for me, so let's see if we can make this work. I'll send a request to Cristina first, and once she joins us, this is Cristina Lundy from the Shakespeare Exchange, and they just wrapped up last night. Hello, Cristina.
Hi, how are you doing? Let's see if we can get Liz in here.
Let's see if I can make that happen now. Let's see if I can make that. I think we can. Let's see, invite to join, invite. Let's see if that works.
Come on.
Ah, we did it!
Yay!
Hooray! Thank you, technology. The latest update to Instagram. All right, so we have our friends Christine Lundy and Liz Thaler from the Shakespeare Exchange. Now, before we get into your show, you just wrapped up The Winter's Tale last night. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Shakespeare Exchange, how long you folks have been around, where you're mostly focused. I know you do the ShakesBEER events, which are like walking tours with beer that go around downtown, and you interject some Shakespeare to them. That sounds just fantastic. But tell me a little bit more about what the Shakespeare Exchange is all about.
Sure. So the company was founded by Ross Williams, my co-artistic director, in 2010, I believe. The first show was done in 2010. And then I joined as associate artistic director in 2011. That was also the year of our first pub crawl. And our programming has really expanded in the years since then. I became co-artistic director in the beginning of 2020, and at the same time as we brought on a new kind of producing programming cohort that Liz is a member of called the Leadership Council. That was a move to also broaden the perspectives that steer our programming past just that of myself and Ross as the only ones who are thinking of what we could possibly do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get to any talking about Winter's Tale, I would love to just throw to Liz because this was a project that was brought up directly by Liz and another council member, Sam, as just the specific show at the specific time that they wanted to try to dip our toe back into live theater. But the pub crawls that we love, that we can't wait to get back into bars live to be able to do that whenever we can safely feel like we can do that. Because the fun of that is really being in a crowd, breathing all over each other, sometimes spitting beer over each other, sometimes climbing on top of each other. So not the most COVID safe, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that will come back soon. But we also, starting in 2013, we launched the Sonnet Project, which is a film anthology project where we invite filmmakers to make a film based on one of the sonnets. And right now we are about 135 deep into the New York one. And a couple of years ago, we set the dial back to 0 and launched a US one and an international one. So we're hoping to kind of do second and third sets of that. We also, in 2018, we started a series with the New York Public Library at 53rd Street called the Freestyle Labs, where we use Shakespeare as a jumping off point or a lens to speak about other topics. We've talked about immigration, Shakespeare translated into other languages, Shakespeare in comic books, Shakespeare and trans identity and trans warriors in the military. And that particular project, then so to go back to the beginning of COVID, this leadership council that I'm talking about, we had an in-person 2-day retreat the weekend before the week that things started to shut down in New York.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And we had whiteboards full of like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to have like events to raise funds and do all these kinds of things. And then we took a couple months to just get all of our bearings with life and sickness and happening to various ones of us at the time. And then started reconnecting to each other and seeing like what could we possibly do, and dipped a little bit of a toe into virtual readings and projects, but didn't go as fully into that as some other companies really did over the course of 2020. But in almost a year to the week later, in March of 2021, we had a reconvening of the Leadership Council, and again, 2 days, this time with a couple weeks in between, to just throw a bunch of ideas on the table. And we had, earlier in the summer, we did a virtual version of the Freestyle Lab that I talked about, where we talked about trauma in Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. We are planning another one for possibly in the next month or so, talking about the Polynesian American experience and migration narratives and oral tradition and relationship with Shakespeare. And later on, at some point, possibly after the new year, we're trying to do one that will hopefully be an in-person freestyle lab on ASL and deaf performers and sign language in Shakespeare. But Winter's Tale grew out of a desire to say, can we do it live? Because as much as the virtual projects have given us a lot of wonderful discoveries, there is something you just really miss about the live experience. So we said, how can we do it safely? What can we do? And we started talking and moving towards like, well, outdoor right now feels more doable if we're building a runway towards planning something over the course of many months. And then as far as show choice, it was Winter's Tale from the beginning for Sam and the producer, or Sam the producer and Liz the director. And so I am certainly ready to throw it to Liz to talk about why that particular show.
Yeah,
if you
Liz,
don't have any other
sure. Yeah,
questions
let's throw it to Liz. Liz, absolutely. That Winter's Tale. I mean, it's a fantastic show, but it's not. It's not the when you ask someone, well, hey, what Shakespeare are you producing? Usually, Winter's Tale is not the first one that jumps out of people's mouths. So, what made you decide on the Winter's Tale?
And that's actually one of the things. First of all, can you hear me? Do I sound all right?
Yeah, hear you just fine.
Can you hear me? Great. What's cool about
Thumbs up.
Yeah,
I hear you just fine.
Is even even if you're a Shakespeare theater goer, some people have seen it a bunch, and some people really are not that familiar with it. It's kind of in that gray area of, is it an obscure play or is it a beloved classic? For me, it's a beloved classic. I've actually seen it many times. I wrote a play about it. I've read books inspired by it. It's one of my longtime favorites. And I think a lot of the people in our cast, some knew it better than others. A lot of people who saw it, it was their first time seeing it. But for me, now was the perfect time. And I've seen wonderful productions of it. There might have been another time where I would have said, I don't know if I need to direct this right now. I saw Aaron Arbus's at Theater for a New Audience, and that was so wonderful. Maybe we don't need Liz Thaler's right now, except that coming into this historical moment for America, just the themes of this nation that has caused trauma to itself and now has to find a way to recover and has to find a way to forgive itself and each other for unforgivable things. That resonated really strongly for me.
What a great through line. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And, Sicilia is a traumatized nation, and it's the king's fault. And the king is a traumatized person, and he did it to himself. And the queen is extremely traumatized, and their daughter is traumatized, and they have to decide what they want to do about that at the end. And the ending is, difficult for a lot of people, and particularly modern audiences. I think perhaps for Shakespeare's audience as well. I don't think it was necessarily supposed to be a smooth, comedic, happy ending, but it's messy, and that's what I like about it, because if we manage to scratch out some sort of happy ending for ourselves, it's not going to be a clean one. There are no clean happy endings for us sometimes when we have done things we can't take back. And that's something, the weirdness of the play is very honest to me. Right. So that I found immediately appealing for now.
So Cristina was mentioning in the beginning of this interview that you guys have so many different things that you're exploring between the sonnet project and between the cohorts and the pub crawls, and all the different things that you're doing to engage New Yorkers, engage audience, engage the larger, not just the theatrical audience, but in general the audience here in New York in different kind of Shakespearean adventures. So you're back on the stage, you're back with the Winter's Tale, and it's as Cristina mentioned, it's a long time coming because you're away, you're doing in the virtual realm, and you're back on the stage. You just wrapped up your run this past weekend. What was it like getting back in that theater, getting with the live audience to interact with your show? What was the feedback like?
The feedback was great. I think the audiences were the easiest part of the whole thing, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you say back in the theater. We were not back in a theater. We were outdoors. And we were outdoors for quite a bit of the rehearsal process, too, because we felt it was the safest way it could be conducted with regards to COVID. I mean, we did have a COVID safety manager as part of the production staff, and we went through a whole process of drafting and revising protocols for COVID safety and testing and symptom checks and everything. And it turned out we were trying to brainstorm possible outdoor places to rehearse when the weather would allow it. And through a couple of trial and errors, the location that I know they ended up using more than anything, I think couldn't be more perfect and gets my heart, because they were rehearsing in Central Park in view of Belvedere Castle in the back of the Delacorte Theater.
Wow, fantastic.
Also, public restrooms happen to be pretty close if you're close to the Delacorte. But I personally, my kind of other life in my career is I support myself doing wardrobe work for theater. And I worked at the Delacorte many years at the beginning of my time in New York. And so when I went to kind of scout the location late one night with the stage manager, and I turn around and there's the castle, and I'm like, oh God, if you guys could just rehearse it here, I think that would be some good karma.
So it was an outdoor venue. Where was the show performed?
In two different locations. Go ahead.
Yeah, up in Woodhill Park, at the top of Manhattan, on the Hudson River, and then in Pier 46, which is just north of the Christopher Street Pier, which is Pier 45, also on the Hudson River, just at the opposite end of Manhattan. And so the sunset in both locations.
Yeah, two little peninsulas on the water on the sunset.
In the past several months, something that I've gotten the vibe from different people we've spoken to here in the different programs that we do is that audiences coming back to see live performances, at least thus far, have been more ready to come to outdoor venues where there isn't as much of a concern about COVID safety as opposed to an indoor venue where there's, there's obviously not as much air circulation. There's more concern about sitting in closer proximity to people. So you were outdoors. So did that alleviate the concern about COVID? Or you mentioned you had a COVID expert that was there to give you guidelines. So what were your protocols that you followed?
That was for actors and crew, the whole cast and production crew, because the actors were performing unmasked and rehearsing unmasked when outdoors. And so we put in place a testing schedule of weekly testing, and our COVID safety manager handled sort of figuring out if people could get tested on their own, checking in on people's results and whether they had managed to test on their own. And then we filled the gaps with home rapid tests that we provide on site, like on the testing day every week. And symptom screeners. We were lucky enough that one of the parents of our producer happens to be the director of infection control for a hospital in Philadelphia, which I didn't know until we were trying to figure out what medical professional could advise us on our COVID protocols. And he's like, actually, my mom does this. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, absolutely. This is a part of the new reality of presenting Shakespeare in New York, is that not only do you have to be, a great theater practitioner, which you've all had your training over the past many years that you've been doing this all. But in the past year and a half to 2 years, we've all had to become film and TV producers in terms of presenting things in the virtual realm. And now many of us have to become experts in handling COVID and
freelance medical professional.
Freelance medical professionals, where you're doing testing. So there's a lot of additional balls to juggle in the process of putting together a show. Liz, you mentioned that the audience and their reaction was the easiest part of it. What were some of the challenges that you faced in mounting this production?
Well, the Exchange and I personally had never done a full production entirely outdoors before, and there's just a learning curve and a lot to contend with when you're performing in public locations. We weren't in the Delacorte. We weren't in an outdoor theater. We were in public parks. And so there are more New Yorkers have jet skis than you might realize, for example. And jet skis are very loud. Also,
they are loud.
Joggers are very insistent on the path that they are going to jog, even if it is directly through an acting space where a play is clearly taking place. Right. So there are just things like that you have to take into account. And sound was a big issue in terms of miking and in terms of Cosette Pin did an incredible sound design, and we had to make sure it was audible. And so just sometimes there were snafus, either a New Yorker who was not thrilled about their Shakespeare being there, making his presence known, or
interrupting their outdoor space.
Yeah, interrupting their drinking schedule,
Right.
or just sound or whatever. Basically anytime.
Oh,
It looks like
Liz might have frozen just a
Liz
little bit.
froze a bit. So while we wait for her to come back,
But I would maybe just jump in and kind of say the
go
same
ahead,
thing.
Cristina.
Like it makes you realize that, you know, what all of us who live in New York realize: when you're living on top of each other in a city like New York, everybody is very protective of their space and their right to that space. So it is this kind of sharing of space with the people who didn't know there was going to be a Shakespeare production in their space.
Right.
And some are happily surprised and some are less happily surprised. And so we try to just find harmony as best we can and understanding with the people who are also using the space for what they want to. But we had quite a few happily surprised people.
Well, that's
Are
what
we
we're
able to get
hoping
Liz
for.
back?
Let's try and get her back. Let's see if we can invite her to come back on. I don't see her in my list of people to pull up. So I don't know if that's going to be possible, but
back in.
We'll keep an eye on it. Well, anyway, we're going to be wrapping up in just a moment. So, Cristina, I'll just throw this kind of final question to you. Now that you do have this full outdoor production under your belt, as one of the heads of the Shakespeare Exchange, what is coming up next for you folks? Is it more full-length productions? Is it a return to some of the other things you were speaking about early on?
It takes a lot of runway to get to a full production, whether it's outdoor or indoor, and the budgetary runway necessary for that and the planning. And as we've also known, like from our experience producing in theater venues, getting a reservation on an available space is also something that can be 12 to 18 months in the snatching.
Right.
So there's a lot of elements.
Current era.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements involved in a runway to another full production. So I will say I'm pretty sure that is in our future. I'm just hard pressed to say at what point in our future right now. But I know that the virtual versions of the Freestyle Labs I mentioned, or the virtual one that will be coming up, I imagine sometime in the next month and a half to look out for that. Probably sometime in November. We're pretty close to setting a date for that, I think, and being able to market that more directly. We also have a wonderful project that is on our website that was launched in 2020 called the Voices Project. That's a project. Hi, Liz! Yay!
Hi. My phone got too warm.
Yes.
Sorry.
But that's another thing I didn't really go into describing, but I invite people to also go on our website, which is nysx.org. And there's a place that talks about Freestyle Labs, about ShakesBEER, about Sonnet Project, about all these things. And the Voices Project is one of those things. And they're actor-created videos where actors who are members of identity groups that are traditionally underrepresented in classical theater and theater in general. So BIPOC artists, trans and gender nonconforming artists, disabled artists. We're gradually building out the catalog of those videos, but we want to give not just a platform for the performances of those artists, but also invite them to show us the resonances of Shakespeare for them personally. So the videos are a speech of Shakespeare of the actor's choice and a second piece of text of the actor's choice that has some relationship that talks back to that initial piece from their perspective. So that's something I encourage people to check out that lives entirely online on our website. And Liz, is there anything you wanted to say that you were cut off by technology from finishing up?
I don't know what the last thing you heard from me was.
You were kind of talking about the sharing space with other New Yorkers who are dead set on having a plan for their night that didn't include Shakespeare. Some are happy to have us and some are less so.
Well, I was trying to say our audiences never seemed to mind, even when we thought that, oh no, this is going to impact the audience's experience. Just across the board, audiences seemed so happy to be there and so appreciative of what our actors were doing and the fact that we were doing this show. I was just honestly blown away by how game everyone was to sit on the ground and watch us do Winter's Tale for 2.5 hours as the light completely changed. And people seemed really happy about it.
Well, listen.
And if I could just say,
Yeah,
based on something you asked the previous interviewee about how do you sell Shakespeare to people who maybe like Shakespeare? I don't know about that. It was really, first of all, I was just really touched by how many little kids, particularly I wasn't as present at the shows in Inwood Hill Park, but at Pier 46, who just were so intrigued and coming up and wanting to see what was going on and everything, and people who brought their kids there. But then even one night, the security guard that we had hired to help us out at the venue, I was talking to him after being with us for the first night he was with us. And I was like, do you like Shakespeare? He's like, not really. And he's like, but I liked yours. I really liked it.
Carlos.
That's great.
And Carlos. And that is something that I'm proud on behalf of the company to say we have gotten a lot of over our time since being founded in 2010, and that is probably the greatest compliment that we cherish, is when people are saying, I didn't think I liked this, but I love it when you guys do it.
Well, one of my favorite things about the Exchange. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of my favorite things about the Exchange that I fell for in the beginning when I was doing a couple pub crawls was that everyone who does shows really cares about the text and really wants to have fun and sees no contradiction between the two. Like, we're going to do Shakespeare and do it right, and that's going to be we're going to have so much fun doing it.
We don't think we need to make it into something that's not. We just think we need to show you what it is.
Exactly.
And that's what it's all about. It's about whatever form of Shakespeare, whether you're doing the plays, the sonnets, whatever. It's about making it approachable and something that the audience can engage in, whatever their experience level is, and something that gets them deeper into Shakespeare. They want to see more. They want to see more of your company. They want to see more Shakespeare, more productions, more of the romances, more of the whatever. So that you're on the right track. If you're having that reaction from the audience, then you're doing your job well. You mentioned your website is nysx.com, correct?
.org.
.org, pardon me. All right, so I urge you guys, check out the New York Shakespeare Exchange. Cristina, Lundy, Liz, Thaler, we thank you both for lending us your time here tonight. I know you're coming off the big production, and there's a lot to sort out after that. But I thank you for joining us, and I wish you all the best. Audience, check them out. Check out their website. It's a wonderful group, and they have plenty of exciting things coming up. Thank you both. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we will bid farewell to Liz and to Cristina, and we will ask our next interviewee of the evening to join us. We're getting a lot of love from the audience. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, send us your smiles, your waves, your thumbs up, your hearts, anything that any questions you have for the people that you've seen thus far, for me, or for any people that we have coming up. We have 2 more interviews coming up in tonight's program. We have James Rightmyer Jr. of Hamlet Isn't Dead with their production of Measure for Measure. That's coming up next. And last but not least, we have our late night group. We have our saucy ladies doing the F Shakespeare podcast. We'll talk to them. We'll save them for last. They're our late night contingent. Let's go next to our friend James Rightmyer Jr. James, I'll send you the invite. And James is part of a wonderful group, a very funny group called Hamlet Isn't Dead. And if you've ever checked out their content, James.
Hey, how are you?
How you doing, my friend?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been quite a while since I've seen you.
Yes. Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's been a while since we've seen anybody, right? But we've had about a year. I think it's been about a year and a half.
Yeah. It's right around that. I think the last time I saw you guys doing your stuff was a little bit before the whole coronavirus pandemic set in. So yeah, and you guys were doing some content at that time. You guys were in the period of time that there was the coronavirus closures. You guys were presenting some really interesting content. But before I get into that, I'll just step back for a second and explain, or ask you to explain, what Hamlet Isn't Dead is all about. And I love your tagline. You're always the some kind of hundredth, the
Yeah.
648th best Shakespeare
I
group in
think
New York.
right now, I think we probably gained a few rankings because probably there's a lot of companies that, that closed in the pandemic. So I think right now we're probably like the 37th best Shakespeare related theater company in New York. But I think that might change by next week when we open our show. I think people are coming back. So I think that, it just depends on when you get us.
I think you're going to break into the top 20. I think so.
We'll see. I mean, fingers crossed.
All right. So tell us about Hamlet Isn't Dead.
Yeah, so Hamlet Isn't Dead. I imagine there's a lot of people on here. Actually, it's fun to be here and see all the crossover. Shakespeare Exchange. We've had a lot of crossover in actors. There's, I was just looking up Witcher's Tale and seeing some of our old alumni and doing stuff like that. But so we all know each other, and I think it comes out of a very common start, which is, so David Laws, who is a drunk Shakespeare actor and, my best friend from back home, and I were jobbing actors, moved to the city. We started a Shakespeare company to do stuff in the meantime, and discovered that was sort of a lot more fulfilling than going out on auditions every day. And so that was, I guess, 7 or 8 years ago now. And our mission with Hamlet Isn't Dead is to work our way through the Shakespearean canon in chronological order in which they were written. So we are now up to Measure for Measure, which is number 25 in our list. And it opens next week on Monday.
That's fantastic. So you guys are 25 productions deep?
That's right. We're 25 productions deep. We cheated a little bit early on. Like we did Henry VI parts 1 through 3 in rep. We did a couple other ones in rep. We conflated Henry IV 1 and 2, but still 25. I mean, it's crazy. We're two-thirds of the way through, depending on who you ask.
That's depending on all the questions about some of the apocrypha. But from what I've seen of your group, you guys are a very humorous group, and you guys have a very self-effacing way about yourself.
Well,
about the 640 whatever and you had all kind of different funny things about the way you approach social media and the way you approach your promotion. But when it gets down to it, when you guys are on the stage, you guys are fantastic. You guys do really really wonderful stuff on stage.
Yeah, I think one of our main ethos, I can't really take credit for this. This is mostly David's thing, but our idea is that all Shakespeare is funny until it's not. Right. And I think that holds true for a lot of shows. I think that tends to lead us in a lot of good directions. Right. Particularly, I'll talk about that for Measure in a little bit. But, I think that one of the issues that we have when we go and see shows, especially when they're the heavier ones, is that, you can be sitting there for 2 and 3 hours and like it just feels like work. Right. It feels like eating your vegetables. And I every now and again I can have a vegetable and really enjoy it, but not 3 hours of vegetables. And so you need a little bit of chocolate in the middle. And so like, I think that's really where we came from. We also, part of that sort of humorous thing is we really want to connect. I think we've all been sort of alluding to this so far, is we want to connect with audiences where they are, it's not like we're not preaching to them. We're not showing them this like eloquent sort of ancient archaic art form. We want to show them that it's fun, like everybody said, and it's universal. And so part of that humor is also we've developed this additional style, which is we have modern music throughout every show, almost always an onstage band. When possible, there are characters in the show. And so that's another huge part of our ethos that sort of lends itself. So, our goal is that a night to a Hamlet Isn't Dead show is going to feel very, it's very signature. It's very on brand, right? You're going to laugh, you're going to have a good time. There are, depending on the show, there's going to be some moments of pathos and moments of catharsis and things like that. Those are really important, and it's really important like we are truthful with those, but at the same time we want people to go and know they're going to have just a good night out at the theater, right? There's going to be some good music. Absolutely. And there's going to be some laughs, and there's going to be some good times.
Now, a few months back during the coronavirus, I think I spoke to David about this a few months back.
Right.
You guys did a kind of like an exploration of which show was it? It was
that was Timon of Athens.
Timon of Athens, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it was like the behind the scenes, right?
Yes, and that was really fun and good. One of the as everybody sort of walked through when they're doing when the coronavirus sort of crashed everybody's plans. is, we had this whole idea for Timon, right? That was at the start of our sort of school year, as it were. And so we did this with our resident acting company. And but then, I think a lot of companies did this. We ran into a lot of just regulations and things about how much can we stream, how much can we do whatever. And so we had this, that project, morphed and changed throughout the whole thing. And we ended up with this really cool thing, which is this sort of just behind the scenes of this workshop that we ended up doing about Timon of Athens. The other thing about doing the works in chronological order is that it does sort of force you to do the ones that aren't, that don't have a diamond on every single page, right? Timon of Athens being one of those. Not that it's bad. I think what we normally discover by the end of producing each play is that, it's still Shakespeare, right? It's still, even the worst plays by Shakespeare are still very, very good. And there's some always really good stuff in it that we never realized before we do it. But, I think that, Timon of Athens is another one of those. Timon of Athens is never gonna, be a blockbuster movie, right? So we have to do something you have to work with what you got.
Yeah, well, what you did, I think, was very innovative and very different, and it was fun to get into the heads of yourselves and the actors as you explored that text. And then after that, you went into, I think it was like a puppet play with Hamlet, right?
Yes, and so that one, we had our whole last season was very experimental. We had, as everybody did, I think people are mentioning this as well, but we had this collision of the pandemic and a civil rights movement all at the same time. And so actually one of the outcomes of that for us was that we, instead of doing our typical mission after Timon, we sort of took a break for a year, and we worked on what we called the series Contemporaries of Color. And so that was trying to find other art forms, specifically not Shakespearean, but maybe that were contemporaries of Shakespeare or things like that. And so we dabbled a little bit in some various art forms. So one of those was no theater, but Karagöz, and I'm actually kicking myself, I'm drawing a blank here. It's a specific Turkish puppetry style. And I think it might be called Karagöz puppets, but I can't remember. The Karagöz is the main character of this puppetry style. And we actually happened in on this show, this amazing director who works out of DC, and who had written this show called Karagöz Dreams of Hamlet, right? And it's fantastic. It's that character from Turkish puppetry, but he sort of performs the title role of Hamlet with his mates, and it really was sort of an extraordinarily lucky discovery. We found this show, and it also happened to involve this live music. It happens to be very funny, and it really worked well. It's a two-dimensional medium, so we really felt like we had sort of lucked into a medium that was both virtual and connected to Shakespeare and connected to Hamlet Isn't Dead, and still sort of fulfilled the mission. So incidentally, that we thought that was so successful, we are actually commissioning sort of a rewrite of that, and we are going to put that on again this December, I think, or either December or January, so upcoming this winter. So Karagöz Dreams of Hamlet's going to come back. We're really excited about that because it was so successful.
The return of that. But then we're here at now what you're doing right now, and that is Measure for Measure. So tell us about that.
So Measure for Measure opens this Monday. Like everybody's saying, we're sort of dipping our toe in the water of getting back to live theater. We're really excited about doing it. This is a show that we cast exclusively out of our resident acting company. As part of our mission, like I said last year, based out of the Black Lives Matter movement and all these other, trying to do our best to be honest and forthright about being inclusive. We expanded our rack and with the idea that we're trying to include all these other voices. And so as part of that mission, we cast exclusively from that resident acting company for this show. So we're starting it on this Monday, and it's actually got a weird run. It's Monday through Friday, starting this Monday. And it's pay what you will. We're more interested in getting back into the swing of doing shows than we are about sort of, we have any pretension about, making any money in this one, right? We got to get back to it. We got to see if people are willing to come to theater. So far, people are booking tickets, which is great. But I think that I think that we're just excited to get back in the room with people. As other folks have said as well, we're sort of adjusting it a little bit. We've got our COVID safety monitor. It's very important. And also, we're changing the seating arrangement a little bit. Folks are going to be spread out throughout the theater. We're capping it at, way below, maybe I think it's 50% or less in the room so people can feel safe. We're requiring vaccinations, all that stuff. But I think that for us, that theater in the round feeling, that intimate space, we're back at Barrios Art Space where we've worked for a long time before. And so that's up on 99th Street at the end of the queue. And it does really feed into the Hamlet Isn't Dead ethos, right? So doors are going to open at 7:15 for live music and a little bit of comedy. We're going to have some stand-up comedy pre each show, just to spice it up a little bit.
A warm-up act.
That's right. And then the show will start at 7:30 each night and runs for about 2 hours.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, I love your group. I think you guys are doing a lot of fun stuff, and I love your commitment to broadening your perspectives and adding to the resident acting company. I'm sure you guys are going to do fantastic work starting next Monday, the 18th. Where can people go, James, to get tickets?
Yeah, best way to go is just hamletisntdead.com. That's Hamlet, ISNT, isn't dead.com. Or you can find us on Facebook, Hamlet Isn't Dead, on or on Instagram, et cetera, all those places. And like I said, pay what you will. Just book your ticket in advance so we can know how many chairs to put out.
All right, fantastic. All right, James. Well, we wish you the best of luck with the Measure for Measure, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right, and that was James Rightmyer Jr. from Hamlet Isn't Dead, who are moving up. They're moving up significantly. They were the 647th best Shakespeare group in New York, but now they're in the top 40. So they're really moving up the charts. We are now down to our final group of the evening, and that is our intrepid podcasters. Let us invite our friends Diana and Erin to join us. Let me see if where we are on our list. Diana, we'll send an invite to you. Audience, we're getting a lot of love. We're getting a lot of great reactions from everybody out there who's still joining us tonight. If you have any thoughts, anything you want to tell us, any questions you want to ask, anything you want to share, by all means, send it across. Hello, Diana.
Hi.
How are you?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. I'm going to add Erin while we are getting started. Okay, and Diana, if I recall correctly. Hello, Erin. Hi there.
Hi.
All right, so you two, you have, I don't know how I even came across your podcast. You have a presence on Instagram that is, I don't want to say the name, well, we're in the late night. Let's say F Shakespeare is the title of your podcast and your social media presence. And the two of you, you're both, I think you're in upstate New York, right?
Yes.
Hey, not upstate. No.
Well, it's upstate to you.
We're right by the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Upstate to me, upstate on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Oh, so you're not too far away. Okay,
Yes.
so you guys, you ladies.
Bridge.
Okay, all right. So you're not too far away. Hop, skip, and a jump. And you two have known each other for a while. How did you two get started on this venture, this F Shakespeare podcast? How did it all come about?
Well, I had a theater company that was mostly for children for 21 years called the Children's Shakespeare Theater. And Erin's kids were some of my students and some of my actors. And so her kids actually brought the two of us together, which is really nice.
And the kids suggested to you the F Shakespeare podcast.
Nope.
We've listened to the kids that we work with talk for years about how Shakespeare gets taught in middle school science, and oftentimes how well-meaning teachers who don't really Shakespeare themselves, but have to be part of the curriculum, don't do the Bard any justice. And we were talking about how we share our love of Shakespearean text in particular with high school students to enjoy it. So we decided dick jokes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Diana, what you had the idea together that, okay, we want to bring Shakespeare out in a way that engages people in a little bit more of a fleshed out way than you can do in the classroom, or something that you're a little bit more free in how you talk about it, as opposed to, I guess, the strictures of how you approach it in the classroom setting. At what point did you come up with the name F. Shakespeare? How did that all come about?
Well, we did bandy around some other names, and we kind of, farmed them out to friends and stuff and kids. And we ended up deciding that, this is going to get the most bang for the buck because maybe, so to speak, maybe high schoolers who are like completely fed up might Google such a thing, perhaps. Who knows? But we're really trying to get their attention. And, they might perceive it at first glance as like, oh, Shakespeare's awful. And what we hope to do is lure them in and make them realize that Shakespeare is actually really a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our aim.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
go ahead, Erin.
We decided to start with the plays that are most often assigned to kids in middle school and high school, and start by picking apart the language, right? So what are all of the words for body parts? What are all of the words for sex? What are all of the words, for and Romeo and Juliet, which is the first play we chose to do, is, full of sex.
Yeah, it's pretty filthy, actually.
It's really filthy.
Yeah,
Do you know that book?
That's something that typically. Go ahead.
Rodney, do you know that book, Filthy Shakespeare? Have you ever seen it?
I know. I don't know that one specifically, but I have maybe 2 or 3 in my collection that are about the different. I think I have one that's called Shakespeare's Body, and one about like dirty Shakespeare. I have different variations on that theme. Then, of course, there's the there's all kind of text. But yeah, absolutely. One of the first Shakespeare texts that students get introduced to, and usually in middle school or early high school, is Romeo and Juliet. And at first blush, it's just like like the star-crossed lovers, and it's this kind of very idealistic thing. But once you scratch the surface a little bit, absolutely, it's filthy. It's just it's full of bawdy humor and just stuff for the groundlings. So you dig into some of that, and you pull back the layers of the onion a little bit, and you reveal to the children what they've been missing in the in the classroom all this time.
Yeah, because there's too much yawning and groaning about, oh, we have to study Shakespeare. Why do we have to study Shakespeare? Why is it relevant anymore? But that's absolutely not the case. Like, we're trying to bring across the message that it's so much about the same things that we all talk about now, today, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's very current. It's one of the things that makes Shakespeare so timeless, is that it taps in so well to all the things that are, whether it's 1598 or whether it's 2022, 21, it's all relevant. It's all still very all hot topics. So you two both have quite a history with teaching Shakespeare. And one of in the bios that you sent over to me, I think Diana, I think this was you. There was something that caught my eye, that you at some point in your career were teaching Shakespeare to rhesus monkeys in a lab in Calcutta.
Well,
how in the world did that happen?
No, sometimes teaching rooms full of small children feels like that. That's why I sort of put that in there. No, we put very cool bios in our in our website also, because our website is just very it borders on fantasy, because we wanted it to be very irreverent and very silly. So that came directly from the website. But no, I've taught all ages of kids and all ages of adults, and sometimes the 80-year-olds are the most contentious and difficult to teach. But I had such a great time teaching kids, and I did that.
Here's a question. What grades did you typically teach, or are you teaching now?
Not teaching now. I actually passed on the artistic directorship to another wonderful woman who's carrying on that company for me. So this was my way to stay connected to Shakespeare in a different way. And unlike your other, unlike your other interviewees, we don't have to deal with any coronavirus protocol.
Right. But just us. But
just us.
Right.
Kids in the company could be this text, or even a younger sibling could be older than that. But the thing that was so great about, and is still so great about children's here, is that the kids are like, they're game, and there's none of that like, I don't get it. You talk about what the text means like you would talk about what the text means with any show, and the kids just accept it. They're good with it, and I think
Are you?
Sorry.
Is your teaching? Were you teaching mostly middle school, high school? What grades were you teaching?
We started at 7 years old and went up all the way up through high school, and there were 2 different troops.
Oh, so it's quite a range.
Yeah. So the kids from 7 to 14 were in a younger group, and then they graduated into a high school group, so that the high school kids weren't acting with the very youngest ones. That was too much of an age spread. But so we had, and in its huge heyday, we had 80 kids in the company. And we did, in 21 years, we did 96 productions, and I directed 66 of them. Wow. Aaron directed a handful, like 4 or 5. Aaron came to the company later at my insistence. I forced her to come and direct with me. Yeah.
Now, Aaron, the same way that I picked out something about Diana's bio, which was more in jest than anything else, something from your bio that piqued my interest was that you do voiceovers, and you record book readings, anywhere from children's books to XXX rated books. But that's quite a gamut to run between the one and the other.
Well, like any other actor, you take the work you get cast in.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Absolutely.
But she just got some really big name books. She got a Simon and Schuster production publication, and she's doing some really big work now. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm very proud of her.
That's fantastic.
But I do.
So
I do.
We were talking.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, yes, I've done a lot of X-rated material.
Is it difficult to do that? Do you have to kind of take a shot of liquid courage before you you do one of those, or you just say, all right, another day of work, let's get to it?
It's acting.
It's acting. It's acting. All right, absolutely. But whatever puts food on the table, right?
Yep.
Okay, so in your teaching, your students range, whether from the Children's Theater Company or your educating days, your students range anywhere from the 7 years old until the end of high school. In that middle age, not middle age, but that middle period, that middle school, like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, when they start to hit that their early adolescence, is it difficult to engage with some of the body of Shakespeare, with the fact that the kids are all, it's so on the nose for them, what they're experiencing as they change, from children to young adults?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that they are very interested in talking about all of that stuff, and of course, they can't do it with teachers, and they can't do it with parents, right? As much. So they do it in the context of the play, and they're able to learn things that way. In fact, I had a couple of funny times that are memorable in our history where we would sit on circle, and we'd meet before and at the end of rehearsals. And this one time there was a very little one sitting next to me, right directly next to me, and we are having a conversation, and I can't even remember which play we were in, but she tugs on my sleeve in the middle of a conversation, and she just goes, "What's a whore?" in the whole circle. The whole circle busted up laughing. All the kids, they were like, what is she going to say? And I just said, it's a woman who gets paid for sex. Go home and ask mom. Fortunately, her mother was a very good friend of mine. So, you know, I didn't think I was going to get into too much trouble.
It's like when we were doing it, well, when Dana was directing As You Like It, she wanted to cut out the line, I am not a slut. And we were like, no, don't cut it. And actually my daughter was playing that role, and, you know, we had a whole conversation about why she says I'm not a slut, and it was great, and they loved it. It engaged them on a whole new level.
Yeah, and there was another line where there was I think it was fifth grade. One of my students, Isaac, and he was playing Sir Toby Belch, and he was in the middle of that fight scene, and you know, with Sir Andrew and egging them on and all that stuff, and he had some, I forgot the line, but it was some line about his sword falling and drooping, and he just wasn't getting, he didn't understand, and I just yanked him aside and I go, it means he can't get it up, and he goes, oh, and he totally understood it after that. Yeah.
So now in the new podcast, in the F Shakespeare podcast, you're giving voice to all this kind of like PG-13 rated stuff that you kind of sort of had to pussyfoot around, to part of my language, in the classroom, but you can get into it on the podcast, and you can just, you know, let free and speak your mind and release some of the things that maybe were pent up in some of those previous discussions.
But also,
yeah.
Diana and I have the sense of humor of 8-year-old boys. So, you know, for us, to talk about all the bodily stuff, it titillates us as well, you know, and there's a lot of laughing, a lot of guffawing. I would say it's more than PG-13.
Yeah, probably.
I would say so too. I listen to some of your content, and you don't hold back. It's a full on
Yeah.
adult conversation, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but it's you have to sit back and make sure the kids are already tucked into their beds when you listen to that podcast. At least in my household. All right. So if people want to catch the podcast, where can they go to find you two lovely ladies?
They can go to all the regular podcast platforms. Spotify. It's supposed to be on iTunes. Hopefully it's coming to iTunes very soon. And Anchor and a whole bunch of other ones at FCK Shakespeare. And we are on Instagram at FCK Shakespeare as well. And we have a website, fckshakespeare.com. So you can find us.
All right. I think you have I think it's five episodes thus far, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we just actually recorded number 11 today. And so we've got a bunch in the can that are coming out. But they come out once a week on Thursdays. And on lucky number 13, we're going to have an interview with a teacher, which will be really fun to see, you know, a teacher's reaction to what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, that sounds very exciting. Listen, anyone who's watching, either watching this still with us live here tonight or watching on the replay, I encourage you to check out Diana and Aaron at FCK Shakespeare, F Shakespeare. I'll say that for short. It's a very fun podcast from two people who have been around Shakespeare a long time, know a lot of the ins and outs, pardon the pun, about the body of Shakespeare, and have a lot of fun in expressing and sharing their thoughts. So check it out at FCK Shakespeare. Diana, Aaron, I thank you both for joining me here tonight, and all the best with your podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, all the best. Okay, so we'll say farewell to Diana and to Aaron. Okay, and we encourage you to go and check out their content. All right, so we had a supersized, overstuffed episode here tonight. We had our friend Zack Zamchik from Variety Live Productions, their immersive theatrical presentation of Midsummer, a Shakespearience, starts this Wednesday night, the 13th, and that you can go to their website, Midsummer, a Shakespearience. We had our friends Cristina, Lundy, and Liz Thaler from the Shakespeare Exchange, and they just wrapped up their production of The Winter's Tale. They have a lot of other content on their website, and that's all coming up soon. We spoke with James Rightmyer Jr. from Hamlet Isn't Dead. Once again, they moved into the top 40 of Shakespeare groups in New York. They're a very self-effacing, funny group, but they're also dead serious with the content and the quality of their work. They're coming up next week as of the 18th, Monday the 18th, with Measure for Measure. And last but not least, we had our two ladies, Diana and Erin of at FCK Shakespeare, a new podcast, a very saucy late night only podcast. And I encourage you to check all that out. To catch this show, this will all be repeated. It'll be kept on Instagram after the show concludes. And we will also port it over to our Facebook and our YouTube pages and share it all across social media. We'll also have links for where you can find our 4 guests and to connect with their content. For more of what's happening in the world of Shakespeare, again, connect with us here on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and pretty much anywhere else where there's social media. At New York Shakespeare. My name is Rodney Hakim. I thank you all for joining me here tonight. Support your local Shakespeare. There's so much of it out there. And support New York Shakespeare. Have a great night. We hope to see you next time.